As we keep an eye on these visuals, let's bring in another guest. Trucks, as we know, have been a key target for looting and burning in the protest that began, I think it was on Thursday evening when we had the first reports. And I'm joined now by Gavin Kelly, the Chief Executive Officer at the Road Freight Association. Thank you so much for your time. I wonder if you can tell us, since, and I think it was Thursday evening that we got the first reports coming in from KwaZulu-Natal about trucks being targeted or burnt or actually being used to block highways. How many trucks have actually been damaged, burnt out, stopped, or in some way impeded in the last few days?
Good evening, Sally. Rather not nice circumstances under which we chat. As we look at what's happening around the country right now, it would almost seem as if the attacks on the road freight industry have paled in significance to what we're seeing. Terrible, terrible scenes. But you're quite right. From Thursday evening, we started having attacks on the logistic highways, especially those of the N3 and the N2 and KZN. And so this morning, we had confirmed 35 trucks that had been totally burnt out. So that's where we are. Of course, these reports are going to keep coming in, and as you see, things are happening. There are trucks on the roads right now, and there will be more attacks happening. So that's where we are in terms of confirmed trucks that have been destroyed.
What are you doing about, and it seems to be, at the moment, it's the main link between Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. What are you doing about trucks on that link between the two provinces? Have they stopped moving, or have you pulled them back, or are they still trying to get back and forward?
Well, obviously, the first thing is that there isn't a blanket call for all vehicles to stop. We can't do that as an association. Each transporter or each company needs to make that call because they have contractual obligations. And then, of course, there are a lot of transporters, guys with trucks out there who are moving essential goods. That's food, their pharmaceuticals that are critical right now in this COVID time. Their medicines, there's fuel. So all of that is quite critical, and some of that has to keep going, unfortunately, no matter what the condition of the roads are. So operators have a number of options that they can follow. One of those is to carefully monitor where the hotspots are, carefully monitor the reports, and reports go out quite frequently, which we gather from the SAPs and from our members on the ground and from Intel resources. And then they can decide, well, am I going to take the risk? And that's what it is. Risk to the employee, risk to all of those on the vehicle and its cargo. Will I take that risk? And there are a lot of transporters who've decided either to move in what seem to be safe at times, so not at night, or not to move at all, or even to use different routes.
What are the hotspot areas right now?
Well, right now, we know that it's KZN. We know it's just about all of KZN. We know it's Eshowe. We know it's in Pangeni. We know in Durban, Pietermaritzburg, there's a fair amount of activity. There's activity on the N3 route again, and we've now seen in Gauteng that there's a fair amount of activity happening out on Witbank. In Mpumalanga, there are incidences happening, and there seems to be some movement down in the PE area in the Eastern Cape as well. So this is spreading. This is not just a small bunch of people who are upset about some political or judicial system. This has become widespread looting.
Something I saw, I think it was on Thursday, it looked like trucks were being used to block the roads. Are you aware of whether any truckers are actually involved in the protest?
No, I don't think the truckers are involved in the protest. What generally happens is a truck is a very good thing to use to cause a log jam. They're 22 meters long, the long ones, 18 meters, the not so long ones. So if you really want to create a problem, to pull a truck across a highway and block 3 or 4 or 5 lanes is quite easy. You would have seen this morning in the Western Cape, there were taxis that were blocking, and obviously one taxi doesn't work, so you needed quite a few. But with a truck, you can create that congestion and that blockage pretty quickly. So one of the reasons why trucks seem to be targeted is because they're quite easy to get hold of. There are lots of them on the road, and once you burn one, once you drag one across a number of lanes, that's it. The whole system comes to a grinding halt. But no, I don't think there are truckers involved in this.
Right. Have any truck drivers been hurt in the last few days?
Oh, thank goodness we can report that We've received no reports of any deaths or any injuries, and we are extremely, extremely grateful that that is the case. Obviously, a lot of truck drivers are traumatized. This is not a nice time to be a truck driver on the road.
Absolutely. You explained earlier that as an association there are a number of different companies. They all have to make their own individual decisions about when and if it is safe to travel. But obviously, issues such as transportation of petrol, that's a really big one, because if that becomes a problem, then literally everything grinds to a halt. What is your understanding of the movement of petrol and whether we're in for any shortages?
Well, obviously, as you rightly mentioned, that petrol is a volatile substance, and the last thing we want to do is have that near fires or any sort of blockage. So those sorts of goods, including medical, oxygen to hospitals by way of example, or even cooking oils, paraffins that are really, really necessary to keep the average South African going, and petrol is used for ambulances and police cars as well as for the whole freight logistics system on its own. Those sort of commodities are especially watched in terms of risk, and the information is fed through to make sure that whatever routes they use, those routes are clear. Or, as we have done in the past, we have asked for assistance, whether it be in convoying or clearing the hotspots or making sure that the routes being used, that there is a very visible and large SAPS presence.
What can you tell me about the movement of vaccines? We've already seen that some malls, some chemists are closing because they just don't want to risk being caught up in any protests. But the movement of vaccines around the country is surely quite critical at this stage. We're just starting to see the ramping up of our rollout. Are you hearing anything of the transportation of vaccines being hindered? I'm thinking particularly as well, you mentioned Gqeberha, Port Elizabeth, and that of course is where the Aspen factory is, making the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. What can you tell us about the transportation of vaccines?
We haven't had reports that vaccines per se have been targeted. And again, this is one of the things, is that generally the freight vehicles are targeted. It's not necessarily what's inside that vehicle. I don't think that intelligence, when I say intelligence, that information is out there that specific trucks are targeted. I think they use the trucks that are available, if you'd use the pun, to do what they need to do. But it is of concern. We have heard of pharmaceutical chains that have closed down, and a number of these are vaccine centres or vaccination centres. And obviously there's concern for those who need to move the vaccines to the malls, and the malls are becoming targets, and this is happening quite widespread, it would seem.
Yeah.
So there is going to be a delay in that, and that is a cause for concern, because at this level, in terms of the type of pillaging that's happening, it would seem as that most of the vaccination centres are going to be hard hit and probably will not vaccinate.
Talk to me about your concerns for tonight as an association for road freight. What is the advice that you're giving your members about tonight?
Well, they need to watch the information that is shared through various portals, and you need to make that decision. We hope that the implementation of the South African National Defence Force in KZN is going to bring some stability, but at the end of the day, you have to watch, see what information is coming out, and it is literally happening continuously. It's almost a stream of continuous reporting, and if you feel it's not safe, then not to move, or to remain in the safe zones of the depots where there is a strong either SAPS presence or military presence.
All right. Well, thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That was Gavin Kelly, Chief Executive Officer at the Road Freight Association.